Hello. Today we're going to read chapter 13 from Never Again Means Never Again. Chapter 13, A Gallery of Thieves. The quote up top is, quote, "The petty thief is imprisoned, but the big thief becomes a feudal lord," end quote. Zhongqi. Well, you've just read a litany of brutality against your fellow human beings, the Jews. But Hitler had very personal accomplices in his inner circle, and all of them were thieves. You would think that stealing from the Jews would be anathema. I mean, if the Jews were dirty scum destined for the death chambers, wouldn't their artwork and valuables be equally dirty and undesirable? So riddle me this. Why did the Nazis steal and steal and steal from the Jews? Well, when it came to wealth, the Nazis were suddenly less picky. They accumulated bloody fortunes and paid for roughly a third of the entire war by stealing Jewish treasure. If Hitler and his cronies weren't so fucking greedy, with the amount they stole from the Jews alone, they could have paid for the entire war, plus Italy's, Britain's, the US's, and others, and had enough money left over to send everyone to Poodle Island in Delaware, where someone could have taught the Nazis at least how to dress. I guess the love of money overwhelmed their sense of indignity and distaste for anything Jewish. Again, these were soulless, diabolical maniacs without consciences. The sick, greedy bastards simply looked the other way when pillaging and plundering the dirty Jews' possessions in a quest to make them their possessions. Eeny, meeny, miny, mo. There are many themes regarding the Nazis, Hitler, the German army, etc., and we must first acknowledge that Hitler surrounded himself with the dumbest, weak-minded, ignorant yes-men since the Roman Empire. They were probably racist before they joined the party, but once they saw that anti-Semitism could help their own standings in the Nazi party, they immediately tried to make various audiobooks of Mein Kampf. But first, here are the extremely qualified and self-made assholes whom Hitler surrounded himself with in a quick snapshot of their craven, worthless lives before they joined the Nazi party. I was kind enough to write down all of their highlights to impress, maybe impress someone about their previous governmental and military history. Hitler wanted these men and entrusted them with all of Germany's government and military. If I had to guess, Hitler was at a male brothel one day and hanging out with Hess and Goebbels, Goering, Himmler, and Heydrich. At some point, he put their names in a hat to decide their roles within the Nazi party. After the pain in Hitler's ass subsided, he called them back to his office and gave them their positions one more time. The rest is history. Here's a quick breakdown of Hitler's highest underlings, the guys you hate groups follow, admire, and look up to. You laugh at their brilliant and witty humor. You admire their tactical achievements in battle. You marvel at how they ran an economy so flawlessly. You're proud and amazed at how secure and safe all German citizens felt. Most importantly, you trusted Hitler's judgment and knew he would never put anyone in prominent roles who couldn't facilitate his vision. You hate groups must be awfully proud of these men and their many accomplishments. Including Hitler, how many children born after 1945 do you think are named after any of these fucks? This will be a brief synopsis, as I want to puke just typing their names. Hermann Goering. He was a World War I pilot. He joined the Nazis in 1922 at age 29. He was a pretty solid pilot in World War I and climbed the ranks to the top of the Nazi hierarchy quickly. He had a lot of responsibilities in the Nazi party and was head of multiple ministries in the Nazi government. He eventually became Germany's 16th president and commander of the Luftwaffe. As commander of the Luftwaffe, he did an absolutely horrific, lackluster, and, shitty job. After he got his ass kicked in the beer hall putsch in 1923, he was given morphine from an injury he sustained, and it turned into a lifelong addiction. By 1941, he started losing favor with Hitler and others. As the Luftwaffe quickly turned into a useless division, Goering was rarely available as he was always hunting for more art, gold, etc. in the countries they captured, that he could loot for Hitler and himself. Though it did not happen, the only accomplishment he almost had was in late 1945. Before getting in the shower, he looked down and almost, I repeat, almost saw his dick for the first time in 30 years. That, ladies and gentlemen, would have been an accomplishment for him. He committed suicide. Joseph Goebbels. As a child, Goebbels had polio, which left him with a deformed foot and one leg 2 inches shorter than the other. His head was the size of almost 2 watermelons. His walking style would later form the future basis of breakdancing. World War I, no service, clubfoot. He earned a Ph.D. in 1921. His thesis was, quote, an 18th century romantic drama, unquote. He wrote a novel that no one bought. He wrote 2 plays that no one saw. He became a bank teller and caller on the stock exchange and was fired in less than a year. He joined the Nazis at age 27. In 1924, he became Germany's Minister of Propaganda. Committed suicide. Heinrich Himmler worked less than a year at a manure processing plant. I'm not kidding. At age 23. Army, 1 year. However, he did not serve. Himmler saw no action in World War I. He studied agronomy in college and soon thereafter joined the Nazi Party in 1923 and the SS in 1925. From 1929, he grew the SS from a few hundred people to over 1 million and eventually was the German Chief of Police, Minister of the Interior, and head of the Gestapo. He also controlled the Waffen-SS. I guess to Germans in the 1920s, agronomy must have been a really badass major. He was a true cocksucker who helped with forming the Einsatzgruppen unit that we discussed earlier. The good news for Himmler is that this finally gave him a chance to spend more time tickling the taint of Reinhard Heydrich. Their love couldn't be bound by borders, even though Reinhard always insisted that Himmler wear a bag over his head. Yeah, you can't blame him. He was a coward and would have never been further than a parking maid in any other government in the history of militaries. Committed suicide. Reinhard Heydrich left home at 18 and joined the German Navy. He was an officer who summarily discharged because he left a senior Navy officer's daughter for some other woman. He was forced to resign at a hearing in front of the Military Court of Honor. Can you blame him? This new gal was a fanatical National Socialist. Eventually, Heydrich was introduced to another fanatical Nationalist Socialist, Himmler. And let me tell you, it was love at first sight. Once Himmler confirmed that Heydrich kept Hitler's unwashed anal beads in his mouth for 24 hours, Himmler immediately promoted Heydrich to head of the Gestapo. Heydrich was eventually Chief of Security Police, SD, and was the person authorized by the Nazis for planning the Jewish final solution. The cocksucker was killed by a couple of Jews who threw a bomb in his car. Didn't die initially, but a few days later expired from an infection caused by the blast. Would have preferred suicide. Rudolf Hess. This demon served 4 years in the military before joining the Nazis in 1920 at the age of 26. He's the guy that had to listen to Hitler shouting and spitting every day while jotting down and dictating Mein Kampf. In his memoirs, it seemed like he really enjoyed jerking Hitler off and watching Hitler fist him. Relax, people. They used mirrors so Hess could see. Hess was an idiot. He had some clout initially within the Nazi ranks, but it was tough for him long-term to hide his idiotness, if that's a word. In 1941, he flew a plane to Scotland to try and negotiate a peace treaty with Great Britain while telling no one in Germany of his plans. Now you see why I had to come up with the word idiotness. I mean, what else can I say about this dolt? He really just did nothing of note outside of typing or dictating Mein Crap and had a high position within the Nazi ranks because of his early relationship with Hitler. Fun fact. Hess was not given the death penalty at the Nuremberg trials and passed away in a prison where he was the only prisoner for his last 20-plus years. Committed suicide. Hi, my name is Galwell. Can you tell me who to support? Including Hitler, you got 5 suicides and 1 murder. These are from the top guys, your guys, the heads of the party, the heads of the government, and the heads of the military. What, and I mean what, could possibly motivate a person on this planet to emulate them? Here's a piece of advice. If you really want to mimic any of those douchebags, I suggest you don't run for any office positions at your local hate group unless your life insurance policy is current. 5 top Nazi officials killing themselves? Has that happened anywhere at any time? These assholes accomplished not one positive outcome for Germany. 0. Nothing. Nothing but death, destruction, lies, and thievery. Why the fuck would anyone look up to these clowns? They did nothing, they were nothing, they accomplished nothing, yet for a brief moment in time, they somehow found the ability to destroy tens upon tens of millions of people's lives and surprisingly find an audience somewhere ever since. Those guys weren't great. They weren't heroes. They are a bunch of psychotic, extremely insecure geeks led by a schizophrenic sociopath. No one ever woke up and said, I can't wait to play or hang out with Himmler, Goebbels, Goering, Hitler, etc. Yet, they were able to climb to the pinnacle of German politics. Once they became untouchable and could rubber stamp with a smile a way to systematically kill an entire race, a race that was 0.0075% of the entire country's population, yet somehow convinced an entire country to believe they were 99% of the problem. I guess that was their gift. These cocksuckers are obviously still fooling people. Anyone who believes one sentence in Mein Kampf is a fucking idiot. Anyone who agrees with any laws they pass is fucking stupid. And anyone, and I mean anyone, who doesn't think that Hitler was anything but a failure in life, who became a narcissistic, self-indulgent, drug-addicted, multi-billionaire on the backs of his rhetoric and timing, is simply a willful, ignorant, no-esteem failure too. Would you guys want any of these guys running our government in the United States? They couldn't run a fucking PTA meeting. Yet they somehow managed to place themselves in a position to kick people out of their homes, steal their possessions, steal their businesses, rape, torture, and murder them. And when it was their turn to bolster and brag to the world all of their great accomplishments, they chose the coward way out by killing themselves. It's just shocking, right? Pay attention. Here's how sarcasm or propaganda can be used in one paragraph. These brilliant world-traveled statesmen, thankfully, were all able to come together to perform this beautiful ideology under one government. Their vast experiences covering a multitude of governmental necessities somehow all came along at the same point to ensure and exceed Germany's need for change. Hitting the Powerball lottery twice would have better odds than being fortunate enough to have these specific men all available at one time. Okay. Personally, I wouldn't let them put together a Lego set, let alone a government. But hey, Hitler's wisdom should rise over anyone else's sensibilities, right? They knew little to nothing, had no experience, yet somehow worked their way up to run an entire military and government. Soon, they realized that the more power they exerted, the easier it was for them to stay in power. In most towns, guys like Himmler, Goebbels, and Hess wouldn't be allowed to run a payphone. With Goering and Hitler's insatiable looting, stealing, and murdering appetites, there was no way that they would give up power. They had nothing else, and frankly, they didn't want to take a chance of someone else being able to tell them no. As for the jaw-dropping acts of thievery, let's start with looting and Hitler's wealth. Early into Hitler's reign as chancellor, he received a letter from the tax office in Munich informing him that in 1934, his taxes from Mein Kampf sales was around $10 million, the equivalent of today's value. He knew the need to give back to his beloved Germany, as he spoke about time and time again. Germany still hadn't recovered from World War I and was dealing with its own massive inflation and hyperinflation. The point is, the country needed any and all funds it could get. A few days after he received his tax bill, he ordered the Ministry of Finance to intervene, which resulted in Hitler being declared 100% tax exempt. The head of Munich's office declared all tax obligation by the Führers were annulled from the start. Hitler was now 100% tax exempt, and he had the tax office write it down and put it on record that he was exempt from paying taxes for life. Hitler set up a company called the Adolf Hitler Donation of German Industry. I'm not kidding. That's actually the name it was formed. Yes, even ignorant anti-Semites like you guys know this is a slush fund, and it starts the, quote, pay-to-play, unquote, atmosphere if you want to make deals in Germany. Apart from killing Jews, the handicapped, and all other minorities, Hitler somehow found the time to implement three of his favorite things in order: personal gain, dictatorship, imperialism, and giving blowjobs. Sorry, that's four. Anyway, Hitler became a billionaire around the age of 41 and a multi-billionaire until his death. His struggle was where to hide his vast wealth, and yet you Aryans continue to keep his lies alive. After Hitler came to power, he focused a lot personally on German industry, theft, and looting to achieve his ultimate true goal, simply making Adolf Hitler the wealthiest person in the world. That's my opinion. Many suckers find it hard to believe since he ran on a socialist platform. Plus, in all his speeches and throughout Mein Kampf, he would never dare lie or mislead anyone. Yes, we know there were a lot of starving civilians and military troops throughout the war he started, but only the ungrateful wouldn't thank him, because if it wasn't for Hitler, those soldiers wouldn't have been starving without weapons in the first place. Anyway, it's his money, and darn it, he earned it. If you wanted to do business in Germany, he and his cronies made it quite simple and easy. Just make the slush fund checks out to Hitler or hand over cash in a Gucci bag. All told, Hitler stole around 700 million Reichmark from his pay-to-play arena, a minor pittance compared to his other means of wealth. For Herr Luther, most of his wealth came from gold, jewelry, art, and currency. I'm talking billions and billions of dollars. Here's a laugh-out-loud example of Hitler blatantly fucking over his constituents. Sometime in late 1934, the Nazi government bought 6 million copies of Mein Kampf, with all proceeds going to, of course, Hitler himself. This shit just writes itself. Can you imagine forcing the government to buy, probably at top dollar, 6 million copies of Mein shit? I mean, everyone can laugh at that. I've seen Hitler's wealth described as anywhere from $5 billion to $300 billion in terms of the 30s and the 40s dollars. When you include all of his massive estates, stolen artwork, automobiles, currency, gold, jewelry, et cetera, all 100% tax deductible in a socialist country, yes, he was monetarily fucking the Germans too. Fortunately for him, and to put all the haters' mind at ease, he plainly didn't give a shit. So don't worry, no harm, no foul, it's just money. Meanwhile, he continued to send German soldiers out to fight and die. And for what? More land for Hitler? Yes. Maybe another car? Yes. More drugs? Yes. Just fill in the blank. How ironic that he constantly and consistently blames the Jews for all of Germany's financial woes and how they allegedly controlled all the finances. They didn't in Germany. Yet, he became by far the worst pilfering leader in Germany and quite possibly world history. Did he ever do anything that he claimed he was going to do? How can you people be so fucking gullible and blind? Here's one I think you'll enjoy, and it sums up Hitler's concerns for Germany. Hitler licensed his face and likeness to the Nazi government. That's right. If his face or likeness was on anything for the government, he received a royalty. Now, that is one of the most impressive narcissistic moves of all time. Every time Hitler stood up in front of his car during parades, he got paid. Hitler would, you mind giving the Nazi government some of that money as your pictures are being forced to be put on public property everywhere, and the government needs money? Hitler's response was no. The other guy's response was, okay, thanks. How much did he need to spend? He had plenty of psychotic underlings who specifically catered to his every need. Furthermore, let's say if he wandered by your house and wanted it, poof, now it's his. Or when he went to town to get his monthly Brazilian wax and mustache trimmed, using the same razor, of course, and he liked that business, well, he became the new owner. How about if he happened to walk into a local bakery, grabbed a few loaves of bread, spit on the person behind the counter to whom he was giving his bread order to, and then had the person murdered? He didn't need a reason. Not a fucking thing anyone could do. Yes, all that money he stole and all those dead bodies he ordered came from his struggle. Who would have thought all these years later that there would be groups and organizations trying to keep his bullshit ideologies alive, even though it's clear he was a money-grubbing, sociopathic, narcissistic, insane, drug-addicted thief? Let's talk about art, property, and valuables. Germany had organized looting throughout the country and wherever it reached in Europe. The plundering was carried out from 1933, beginning with the seizure of property of German Jews until the end of World War II, particularly by military units known as the Kunstschutz, Einsatzgruppen, etc. Although most of the plundering was acquired during the war. In addition to gold, silver, and currency, cultural items of great significance were stolen, including paintings, ceramics, books, and religious treasures. I think we're almost at the millionth reason how full of shit Hitler and his butt buddies were. These douchebags thought so little of Jews, their customs, etc. So why do they feel the need to steal their belongings? Why would a German want a piece of artwork owned by a Jew? Wouldn't they find that reprehensible? How could a fine, upstanding Aryan woman want jewelry previously around the neck of a Jew? I don't get it. Didn't they read Mein Kampf? Where do you start when trying to explain the largest looting achievements of all time? Let's start with property. Why didn't the Nazis blow up all the property and rebuild if the property was previously owned by a Jew? How could the Nazis possibly live in a place that a Jew formerly lived in? Where were the commitments from all these Nazis? The master race. Dimwits living in former Jewish home or an apartment. How could that be? Stealing their jewelry and valuables any and all of their currency, etc. Isn't it against everything the Nazis were teaching? The Nazis, all of them, systematically trying to kill every Jew in Europe and the Soviet Union, were at the same time stealing all their property, art, artifacts, cash, coins, and so on, without any justification in the theoretical mentality of how a Nazi is supposed to act as it relates to Jews. The simple and obvious reason for their looting and not caring about items previously owned by Jews is that they were all full of shit and liars. Hitler couldn't have been clearer on his thoughts about Jews and his attitudes towards them, yet when it came to valuables, he instructed concentration camps to pull out fucking gold teeth. Say it, it's okay. Hitler and his Nazis were full of shit. These acts of thievery became the quickest way for him to become the wealthiest person in the world and the easiest way to fund the war. He had it down to an art form. Not that Hitler or the Nazis gave a shit, but what about the massive amount of property that the few survivors had to come back to and find that their property was no longer theirs? Or a much larger number of Jews who owned property and never came back at all. Have all those families been compensated? How about all the cash and valuables that were stolen? We're talking hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars stolen. Hitler and Goering were by far the biggest thieves, not only in World War II, but in modern times and possibly of all time. Hitler will go down, he's already gone down, but as the biggest artifact, sculpture, property land, etc. thief in the history of the world. In my opinion, his thievery throughout World War II and the dollar value associated with it will last 1,000 years, or 988 more years than his Reich. Congrats. Obviously, there were times in history when countries acquired lands and territories, such as Napoleon, Alexander the Great, Genghis Khan, while also accumulating incalculable amounts of money. But it wasn't under the guise, the bullshit guise, that was being done for the destruction of a specific race or his Volkisch, Weltanschauung, Lebensraum crap. I certainly won't list all the artifacts, valuables, books, cash, property, etc., as that would take years, but I would guess in today's dollars it would be possibly $1 trillion plus that the Nazis stole, if you just add up everything that they took. Currently, there's no consensus, and there will never be an accurate number, as there was no way they could have archived everything that was stolen. Plus, all the off-the-books theft. Again, it's quite tiring hearing the constant blaming of all the ills caused by the Jews until Hitler wanted and needed their valuables. Imagine if you were a soldier and your unit was in a battle with injuries and death all around, and you later find out it was all to capture and take a museum so Hitler and Goering could steal whatever was inside. I wonder if these soldiers felt contempt or if they were ever brainwashed, if they were brainwashed enough to justify their actions. Here are a few countries that were looted and have somewhat verified dollar amounts accounted for, but certainly not all. I'm not going to list all the countries, but those mentioned should give you an idea of the true definition of looting. This listing will also mention a few individuals who were the ringleaders of these outrageous amount of thievery. Poland. According to the Polish Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the Recovery of Cultural Goods, quote, thousands of art objects were looted as the Nazis systematically carried out a plan of looting prepared even before the start of the hostilities. Many facilities and 25 museums were destroyed, end quote. Let's continue. The Gazeta Wyborcza reported, quote, the total cost of German Nazi theft and destruction of Polish art is estimated at $20 billion, or an estimated 43% of Polish cultural heritage. Over 516,000 individual art pieces were looted, including 2,800 paintings by European painters, 11,000 paintings by Polish painters, 1,400 sculptures, 75,000 manuscripts, 25,000 maps, 90,000 books, including over 20,000 printed before 1800, and hundreds of thousands of other items, artistic and historical value, end quote. The Polish Ministry of Foreign Affairs continue, quote, Germany still has quite a bit of Polish items looted during World War II. For decades, there have been negotiations between Poland and Germany concerning the return of the looted Polish property, end of quote. Now, not that you haters give a shit, and obviously Hitler never did, but I wonder how many Germans, Polish military, and Polish civilians were murdered or wounded to capture this art. And again, where did the money go from the selling of this art? Do you think it might have gone to supplying food for people into the concentration camps, POWs, German soldiers on the front lines, German civilians? According to Gideon Taylor, director of operations of World Jewish Restitution Organization, or the WJRO, quote, before World War II, 3.5 million Jews lived in Poland, making up 10% of the population. In Warsaw, the figure is estimated at about a third of the then 1 million population. More than 90% of them were killed in the Holocaust, and their property was looted by German Nazis or nationalized by the post-war communist government. And, quote, heirless property taken over by the communist regime that ruled Poland until the end of the Cold War in 1989 had a combined value of $30 billion, according to the experts commissioned by the Israeli government 14 years ago. They estimated that there were about 170,000 private properties held in Poland wrongfully seized from Jewish victims of the Holocaust and eventually nationalized by the communist government, end quote. The estimates I've seen in Poland range from $30 billion to $300 billion. When you see a range like that, it reinforces that no one really knows the true vastness of the thievery. Regardless, it's a shitload of property stolen from the Jews. Obviously, we will never know how much wealth was stolen from the Jews in total. How do you evaluate stolen property a year, 10 years, or half a century later and put a value on it? There were probably some very low-priced communities back in the 30s and 40s that now could be the highest priced in the city and vice versa. This also includes gold, currency, etc., in the sense that so much of these were stolen by soldiers and civilians that still aren't accounted for. The Germans, finally, did an internal study over 3+ years, and here are their findings. From Hans-Peter Ullmann, a Cologne University professor, states, quote, German chancellors, Hitler's Nazi Party actively worked to destroy Europe's Jews financially and financed 30% of the entire war with the money they robbed, according to researchers, end quote. Quote, according to the Daily Mail, Nazi officials robbed 120 billion Reichsmarks, over 12 billion pounds. Today's U.S. dollar value, $638,554,445,445 by looting and through confiscation laws. End quote. And, quote, the figure has been revealed in a study by the German Finance Ministry to uncover its crimes while the Nazis were in power from 1933 to 1945, end quote. Again, I want to highlight that this study was done by the German Finance Ministry. They would have more access than any individual or group to review and evaluate actual paperwork of all studies that have been done. According to Christine Kuhler of Munich University, quote, tax laws discriminated against Jews from 1934, while some who had managed to leave Germany before the Holocaust had much of their wealth seized through an exit tax, end quote. And, quote, tax offices built hierarchies of bureaucrats who discovered dwellings and bank accounts and emptied them, end quote. And, quote, Nazi officials seized and sold the property of Jews who left or were sent to extermination camps, both in Germany and in nations conquered during the Second World War, end quote. All that money, all that stolen wealth. And what did it get Germany? For all intents and purposes, the war was realistically over in 1943, early 1943. As Hitler and his psycho buddies were murdering Jews and other minorities, his actual policies wiped out Germany. For 12 years, Hitler and his merry band of thieves enriched themselves on the backs of unknown German civilians and soldiers. And yet today, there are groups and organizations trying to emulate those selfish Nazi assholes. Why? Well, it certainly helped pay for Hitler's drugs, Himmler's butt plugs, Goebbels' rectum enhancement, his first 2 surgeries, they didn't get it right. Goering's knee pads and just enough left over to extend the war long enough to ensure the Germans who elected him would get nothing. The German citizens got 12 years of propaganda, terror, lies, and death. Too much death and too many lies. Hitler eliminated most of the Jews in Europe, and unfortunately, there are ignorant Europeans trying to further Nazis' lies still today. It's important to note that this book applies to every hate group on this planet. I can't believe I have to state that, but if I knew the word moron, idiot, or stupid in every language, I type it out. This book is for anyone, anywhere, who tries to emulate anything about Hitler and Nazi ideologies, philosophies, propaganda, shitty mustaches, etc., if they act on it or not. Also, regarding hate groups, I include anyone who is anti-Semitic, racist, homophobic, religious, ethnic, disabled, etc., etc., etc. Everyone. Jews in all countries worldwide have done nothing but enhance and advance the arts, politics, education, culture, economics, and overall just great neighbors and citizens, no matter where we are. Europe, as a continent, is not nearly as strong without the proud, long-lasting, vibrant Jewish communities that occupied every country there. And you know what? As more people really understand who Hitler truly was, we start associating him with you, those who participate in the hate. Why should we differentiate any hate group member from Hitler, the Nazi Party, and their actions? Their policies were all 100% about themselves. So by being in any of these groups, we already know your stance. I just refuse to believe that you would want to bring your children up in a society without freedom and friends, as dictatorships always reward those who turn others in. You hate groups one day may face a situation where your belongings are taken from you. Gone. It may happen for no reason, just one day, out of the blue, gone. Gone. Gone, and you can't get any of it back. Do you advocate that, or just when it happens to someone else? Utterly disgusting, reprehensible, and more. How could you possibly support medical experiments on children? Being gassed in vans, burning alive, thousands upon thousands, gas chambers, bullets. I could go on and on. My gosh, I mean, it's sickening. Do you hate groups want to know the definition of real toughness? Then study those who have made it out of those camps and lived their lives. Those are the people you should admire and respect. And none of those great people ever did anything to you, your family, your parents, or your grandparents. Nothing. Germany. This is back to looting. Germany. A few art dealers were commissioned by Hitler and Goering to sell roughly 16,000 paintings and sculptures from German museums from 1937 through 1938. Why, you ask? Why did they do this? And why wouldn't they just burn the art? I could go on and on in a long diatribe about this question, but the answer doesn't require an explanation, as it's simply Hitler's ego and greed for money. A greed that caused the death of tens of millions for his personal gain. That's it. There's nothing hiding behind door number 2. Well, maybe that art wasn't burned so it could generate revenue for Germany's war effort. Yeah. Anyway, in late 1940, Goering, who in fact controlled the ERR, it was a Nazi party organization dedicated to appropriating cultural property during World War II, he issued an order that effectively changed the mission of the ERR, mandating it to seize Jewish art collections and other objects. According to Jonathan Petropoulos, author of Art as Politics in the Third Reich, Goering also commanded that the loot would first be divided between Hitler and himself. Hitler later ordered that all confiscated works of art were to be made directly available to him. Really? What took him so long? So hold on here. So the ERR was in charge of looting. No, repossessing of art, sculptures, etc. from Germany, France, Netherlands, Belgium, Poland, Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, Greece, Italy, and some territories of the Soviet Union. Hitler, who is by now a billionaire, on his way to becoming a multi-billionaire, dictated first where all the valuable art was sent. And by sent, I mean sending the art to his palatial estates, tunnels, and underground storages. Yeah, Hitler was all about spreading his ideology. His backward-ass ideology that intentionally enriched himself at the loss of his soldiers and civilians who desperately needed food and equipment. Where do we sign up? What a sick, psychotic dictator. But don't fret, he was quickly, and I mean really quickly, moving up the wealthiest person in the world list, which seems to be the only thing he could hang his hat on. Also, and I don't expect you to give away any secrets, but to the hate groups, which libraries and art galleries do you guys have your eyes on? I'm not sure most of Germany's soldiers and their relatives were comforted. I'm sure most of Germany's soldiers and their relatives were comforted knowing how much money Hitler, Goering, Goebbels, etc. were profiting off spilled blood. Anyway, it was wartime, so how much time could Hitler and his henchmen spend on picking out art, right? Author Petropoulos continued, quote, from the end of 1940 to the end of 1942, Goering traveled 20 times to Paris. Paris was the first operating unit that acted like a hub for art from Western France, Belgium, and the Netherlands, end quote. Over that time, Goering picked out 594 pieces for himself. Who knows how much Hitler received? Thousands at a minimum. The rest were given to other subordinates. In German-occupied countries, the ERR seized 21,903 art objects. Again, Goering traveled 20 times. 20 fucking times in the middle of a war where he was head of all command of the Luftwaffe, the airplanes, to go steal art. It was bad enough the ass-kicking the Luftwaffe took throughout the war, and yet he was still out trying to collect stolen art. Another Nazi hero. Russia, still relating to art. Where does one begin on the theft of Russian treasures? As of 2008, lost artworks of 14 museums, as well as bodies of the Russian State Archives and CPSV archives, were cataloged in 15 volumes, all of which were made available online. They contain detailed information on 1,148,908 items of lost artwork. The total number of lost items is unknown so far because cataloging work is ongoing for other damage to Russian museums. To summarize, I just picked out a few countries. Here are a bit more stolen items from Belgium and France. In artwork alone, France had over 100,000 pieces stolen by the Nazis. I don't think I can express enough about the overwhelming and outright theft from Germans in World War II. It just amazes me how much they stole in such a short period. These assholes would just walk into a museum or a library with men ready to load empty trucks and proceed to steal as much as they could. According to the Jerusalem Post, quote, between August 1940 through February 1943, Nazi forces looted some 150 libraries across Belgium, stealing an estimated 250,000 to 300,000 books, end quote. I'm sure there was a heavily attended book burning ceremony in Belgium that the Nazis put on, right? Nah, I'm sure those books were to be used in high schools and colleges throughout Germany, right? During Germany's occupation of Belgium, Belgium was forced to pay nearly 2/3 of its national income, equaling $5.7 billion. This, of course, was justified by Germany, as they said it was a tax to pay for Germany's military occupation. I'm sure there are a lot of you hate groups who've said, quote, big deal, they're only paintings or miniature sculptures, etc., end quote. It's understandable when you've grown up thinking the greatest art you've seen is when taking a Rorschach test, but art has true value, both a market value and intrinsic value, for those who have kept certain art or any art in their families for years. Now, this is just from the Eastern Europe alone. But according to R.L. Hayden, quote, the ERR, and of course the Wehrmacht visited or stole from 375 archival institutions, 402 museums, 531 institutes, and 957 libraries, end quote. Who knew the Germans were so fond of the arts? I've done a lot of research on this topic, and I haven't really found too many specifics from German-controlled countries regarding property theft. The number of stolen apartments, homes, and businesses is such a large number. But unfortunately, most of the cities and towns where all this thievery went on will not post their findings. Can you imagine right now going into your dwelling and finding a couple of cops at your front door telling you that you had 20 minutes to collect your belongings, but adding anything of value must stay? From there, you go to the business you've built, find the locks have been changed while you're watching through a window and seeing a few guys signing over your patents. Or maybe you're just walking over to a family member's house shelter. You take a few more steps and realize you're staring at one another as their house is now gone too. That's how fast it was to lose everything. Eventually, though, you are rounded up and put in a ghetto where, on average, a one-bedroom apartment needs to sleep 60. Again, what would your reaction be? Millions of Jews and a lot of non-Jews experience this horror. This didn't happen 1,000 years ago. This was less than 100 years ago in a sophisticated country. In the United States, our residents are our sanctuaries. We rest in our homes, we raise children, we laugh, we cry, and we have a tremendous number of laws to protect our dwellings. A home, condo, apartment, RV, boat, etc. gives us all something very special: comfort, security, and ownership. Look at our laws in the United States. My gosh, if someone tries to break in, vandalize, or commit arson, we can virtually do anything to repel them. If somebody breaks into our house in this country and we shoot a bazooka at them, most of the time a cop will just say, nice shot. I don't know much about the laws in other countries regarding breaking and entering, but in this country, over 393 million guns are owned by citizens, and a lot of those guns are to back up our rights. We can be and should be prepared for any encounter to repel any invader legally. Back to Germany. Say you've packed a suitcase of clothes, maybe a trinket or a picture or two. Maybe you're married. Now you need to worry about your wife, of course, and a couple of kids. Are you starting to get the picture of what an absolute fucking nightmare scenario this was? Now imagine this happening to thousands of families and individuals at the same time. According to Shannon Fogg, professor of history at Missouri University of Science and Technology, quote, from 1942 to 1944, German occupation forces in France sealed off and systematically looted at least 38,000 abandoned apartments in Paris that were owned by Jews who had been forced to flee or who had been deported to Nazi concentration camps, end quote. What's that? Roughly 160,000 people were forced out in only one city. Just to put this context of the thievery itself, and before the 1942 to 1944 displacement of Jews, Fogg states, quote, Alfred Rosenberg, the mastermind of Operation Furniture, not a typo, the mastermind of Operation Furniture, wrote a letter to Hitler asking permission to strip uninhabited Jewish homes in Western Europe of their furnishings and personal effects. I mean, talk about a wasted letter. I mean, what was Hitler going to say? No? By now, Hitler was the founder and CEO of the Nazi German Ponzi scheme. By the way, some of Hitler's underlings and subordinates were getting a little frustrated because they felt they were only getting to choose from leftovers. Well, that's because it was true, but now they would never tell him that directly. However, Himmler kept bugging Hitler to allow him to suck Rosenberg's dick because of the certain duvet cover he knew Rosenberg would come across while in France. Anyway, Hitler said no, but Himmler asked him if it would still be okay if he could blow him without the duvet cover. Absolutely. And last I heard, that duvet cover looked gorgeous hanging in one of Hitler's chalets. Yeah. I do want to point out, regarding Rosenberg asking for, quote, permission to strip uninhabited Jewish homes, unquote, this is officially the first joke I've heard from any Nazi Party members since I started writing this book. Finally. Anyway, Fogg wrote a substantive account of this grand theft, estimating the operation required, just for this alone, 27,000 freight cars. I'm going to repeat that. 27,000 freight cars. And this was from 25,000 homes and apartments they took over. Quote, the Germans literally took everything they found inside the apartments and homes, said Fogg. Furniture, bedding, family photos, knickknacks, personal paper, rugs, light fixtures, and kitchen sinks, end quote. Also, tricycles for Goebbels, used condom for Himmler, stretch pants and nylon stockings for Goerings, and money, gold, jewelry, and art for Hitler. By mid to late 1942, and until they found Hitler's body smoldering like a flammable grease fire, you hate group members cared more about Nazis than Hitler did. However, and during the same time, he definitely cared more about Hitler than you ever will. Thanks.